Have you ever met someone who is always relentlessly fine? The kind of person who smiles through a crisis, offers to help while their own world is quietly crumbling, and whose default answer to "how are you" is a polished, effortless "I'm good, everything's good." They're the rock, the reliable one. The friend who remembers your birthday but never mentions their own. The colleague who absorbs the team's stress without a flicker of complaint. From the outside it looks like strength, unshakable competence, emotional maturity, but inside it often feels like a silent, exhausting performance. A performance where the script was written a long, long time ago. This isn't about being positive. It's not about optimism or resilience. This is about a specific, learned survival mechanism, the compulsion to be the easy one. The person who causes no waves, demands no attention, and manages their needs so quietly that they become invisible even to themselves. It starts subtly. A child learns through 1,000 small moments that their big emotions are inconvenient, that a parent's patience is thin, that a caregiver's mood is volatile, that love feels safest when it's earned by being low maintenance. You learn to translate your own distress into a language of accommodation. You don't cry, you make a joke. You don't ask for help, you figure it out. You don't express need, you anticipate the needs of others. Your nervous system wires itself for preemptive peacekeeping. The world rewards this, of course. You become the good kid, the easy employee, the understanding friend. You're praised for your independence, your stability. The feedback loop tightens. Being fine becomes your identity, your value, your primary form of belonging. To stop being fine feels like a moral failure, like you're betraying the one role you've mastered. But here's the psychological twist. The quiet gaslighting you perform on yourself, you start to believe the performance is real. You confuse the mask for your face. The act of managing your emotions so they don't disturb others becomes so seamless that you lose the ability to distinguish between what you're managing times and what you're actually feeling. A deep sadness gets filed away as tiredness. A legitimate anger is rationalized as stress. A fundamental need is dismissed as neediness. You construct an entire inner world where your feelings are not signals to be heeded, but problems to be solved, or, better yet, prevented. Your internal dialogue becomes a constant, low-grade risk assessment times. How will this affect them? What will they think if I say that? Is my reaction proportionate, or am I being a Karen about this asterisk? The goal is no longer to be authentic. The goal is to be time's unobjectionable asterisk. And for a while it works. The system is efficient. You avoid conflict. You earn approval. You feel a grim sense of control. But the cost is a slow, pervasive disconnection from your own instincts, your desires, your raw and unedited humanity. You live in a beautifully maintained house, but you've locked yourself out of the most vital rooms. The plot twist isn't a dramatic breakdown. It's much quieter and far more insidious. It's the moment you realize that your profound sense of loneliness has nothing to do with other people. It persists in a room full of friends, in the arms of a partner, because the person you are most estranged from is yourself. You have become a stranger to your own heart. You've been so busy curating your reactions for public consumption that you've lost the private, messy, essential language of your own soul. The performance of being fine hasn't protected you from pain. It has simply ensured you face it entirely alone. And that is the first silent crack in the foundation. The moment the easy one looks in the mirror and meets the gaze of someone they have never truly allowed to exist. The realization that the peace you worked so hard to create for everyone else was built on a quiet war within yourself. This is where the real story begins. Not with a collapse, but with a question whispered so softly it's almost inaudible beneath the weight of a lifetime of being times fine asterisk. What would happen if I stopped? You learn to call it stress. It sounds so much more acceptable than anger. Anger is messy. It's volatile. It's a Karen screaming in a parking lot. Stress, though, stress is a modern credential. It means you're busy, you're important, you're carrying weight. So the hot, righteous flash in your chest when your boundaries are trampled, that's not a signal. That's just your cortisol spiking. Manage it. Meditate it away. Don't be difficult. And that need, the one for consistency, for a simple "I'll be there at 8" that actually means 8. That's not a fundamental requirement for trust. That's neediness. It's clingy. It's high maintenance in a world that prizes low-effort connections. So you learn to downgrade your needs into preferences, and then to apologize for the preferences, until finally you just stop mentioning them at all. You become an architect of your own diminishment. You build a smaller, quieter version of yourself that fits neatly into the spaces others leave open. Your anger becomes a glitch in the system, not a fire alarm. Your needs become a software update you can postpone indefinitely. The goal is no longer to feel fulfilled, but to be functionally invisible, to take up so little emotional space that you become impossible to abandon. And it works. You are praised for your flexibility. Your relationships feel smoother because there are no bumps, no friction. There is only the quiet hum of your own concession. You mistake the absence of conflict for the presence of peace. But the body keeps score. It always does. The plot twist is not a confrontation. It's a collapse of metaphor. It's the Tuesday you're standing in the grocery line and someone cuts in front of you with a mumbled excuse. And instead of the usual internal sigh, the rehearsed, "It's fine, they must be in a hurry," your hand tightens around the cart handle. You feel a tremor in your own jaw. And you hear a sentence form clear and cold in a voice you don't recognize as your own times. "I'm so tired of being the easy one." Asterisk. It's not about the line cutter. It's about the last straw you didn't even know you were carrying. It's the silent somatic rebellion of a system that can no longer tell the difference between being adaptable and being erased. In that moment, you see the entire economy. You see the ledger where you've been paying for relational peace with your own authenticity. You've been gaslighting yourself, calling your soul's protest stress, framing your heart's requirements as neediness. The profound loneliness you feel has nothing to do with other people's absence. It's the loneliness of self-abandonment. You are lonely for yourself, for the person who knew what they wanted, who knew what they deserved, who knew when they were angry and had the right to be. You have been so careful not to be a Karen to the world that you became a tyrant to your own spirit. This is the pivot. The moment the easy one realizes that ease has a price, and the price is a life lived in the shallow end of your own experience. Healing doesn't start with an explosion. It starts with that tremor in the jaw. It starts by refusing to translate your own truth into a more palatable dialect. It begins when you stop calling a legitimate anger stress and start calling a boundary a boundary. When you stop calling a fundamental need neediness and start calling it a requirement for your presence. The world may have preferred the quieter version of you, but your life depends on the one who finally speaks up. Part 3. The tremor. It's not a confrontation. It's a collapse of metaphor. It's the Tuesday you're standing in the grocery line and someone cuts in front of you with a mumbled excuse. And instead of the usual internal sigh, the rehearsed, "It's fine, they must be in a hurry," your hand tightens around the cart handle. You feel a tremor in your own jaw, and you hear a sentence form clear and cold in a voice you don't recognize as your own. Asterisk. "I am so tired of being the easy one." Asterisk. It's not about the line cutter. It's about the last straw you didn't even know you were carrying. It's the silent somatic rebellion of a system that can no longer tell the difference between being adaptable and being erased. For years you built an identity on being low maintenance, on being the one who didn't make waves. You learned to fold your desires into smaller and smaller shapes to fit the spaces others left for you. You called it flexibility. You called it being a team player. You called it not being a Karen. But the body keeps a different kind of ledger. One written in muscle tension, in shallow breath, in the quiet dread that arrives on Sunday nights. It doesn't understand metaphors like being the bigger person. It only understands weight. And you have been carrying a weight you never agreed to hold. In that moment at the register, you see the entire economy. You see the ledger where you've been paying for relational peace with your own authenticity. Deposit your opinion, deposit your preference, deposit your right to be disappointed. In return, you receive the thin currency of, "She's so easy to be around." You've been gaslighting yourself, calling your soul's protest stress, framing your heart's requirements as neediness. The profound loneliness you feel has nothing to do with other people's absence. It's the loneliness of self-abandonment. You are lonely for yourself, for the person who knew what they wanted, who knew what they deserved, who knew when they were angry and had the right to be. You have been so careful not to be a Karen to the world that you became a tyrant to your own spirit. This is the pivot. The moment the easy one realizes that ease has a price, and the price is a life lived in the shallow end of your own experience. You've been managing reactions theirs and your own, instead of inhabiting your reality. The tremor in your jaw is not a sign of breaking. It is a signal of return. A long dormant part of your nervous system is reactivating, not for fight or flight, but for integrity. It is drawing a line in the sand of your own body. Healing doesn't start with an explosion. It starts with that tremor. It starts by refusing to translate your own truth into a more palatable dialect. It begins when you stop calling a legitimate anger stress and start calling a boundary a boundary. When you stop calling a fundamental neediness and start calling it a requirement for your presence. The world may have preferred the quieter version of you, the one who absorbed the friction, who smoothed the edges, who asked for nothing. But your life, the depth, the color, the truth of it depends on the one who finally speaks up. Not to the person in line necessarily, but to the part of you that has been waiting for years to be heard. That tremor is the beginning of a new vocabulary, one where no is a complete sentence, where I want is not a negotiation, where your discomfort is not a problem to be solved, but a compass to be followed. You are not becoming difficult. You are becoming real, and a real thing by its very nature takes up space. It has edges, it has weight, it cannot be easy, and it cannot be erased. The world may have preferred the quieter version of you, but your life depends on the one who finally speaks up. You know, that hollow quiet, the one that settles in after you've said yes for the 100th time when you meant no. It's not the quiet of peace, it's the silence of a self slowly ghosting its own life. You've become so fluent in the language of accommodation that you've forgotten the mother tongue of your own desire. You're not lonely for people, you're lonely for times you asterisk. For the version who knew her own taste, her own limits, her own righteous fire. This is the anatomy of self-abandonment. It's not a dramatic exit. It's 1,000 tiny surrenders dressed up as maturity. You call it picking your battles, but you never pick one for yourself. You call it being the bigger person, but you've made yourself so small you're practically invisible. The fear isn't of conflict. It's of being seen as times difficult, asterisk. Of being labelled, that word, that weaponized shorthand for a woman who dares to occupy her own space. So you preemptively shrink. You become the easy one, the chill one, the one who treats her own soul like an inconvenient guest. But the body keeps a ledger. It always does. That low-grade exhaustion that coffee can't touch, that's the interest. The inexplicable heaviness in your limbs on a Sunday night. That's the principle coming due. Your nervous system is not a metaphor. It's an accountant, and it is tallying the cost of every time you traded your truth for temporary peace. The debt is paid in fatigue, in a dulled sense of colour, in the eerie feeling that you are watching your own life from behind soundproof glass. Then comes the tremor, not in the world but in you. A flash of heat in your chest when a request feels like a demand. A sharp, unfamiliar clarity when an excuse rings hollow. It feels like anger, but it's not. Not yet. It's recognition. It's a long-buried part of your awareness, punching its way up through topsoil, gasping for air. This isn't you becoming difficult. This is you becoming times detectable. Times to yourself again. Here is the plot twist, the one you never see coming. Asterisk, asterisk. The person you've been most afraid of inconveniencing is the one you live with every second of the day yourself. Asterisk, asterisk. You've been gaslighting your own spirit, telling it its hunger is greed, its fatigue is laziness, its boundaries are rudeness. You've been the tyrant, the critic, the dismissive parent to your own needs, all to avoid the phantom judgment of a world that's mostly not paying attention. The moment of truth isn't a confrontation with someone else. It's the quiet internal click when you stop translating. When you stop editing the raw data of your experience into a more palatable report. That knot in your stomach isn't anxiety to be meditated away, it's a times, no times waiting to be spoken. That tightness in your throat isn't fear, it's a truth waiting for its voice. Healing begins in the reclamation of language. It starts when you stop saying I'm fine and admit I'm frayed. When I don't mind becomes actually I do. It's the deliberate, awkward, powerful act of calling a thing what it is. A violation is not a misunderstanding. A depletion is not just a busy week. Your need for rest is not a luxury. It is the non-negotiable maintenance of the only vessel you have. This is the pivot from managing perceptions to inhabiting your presence. The easy one dies, and something more real, more textured, and infinitely more alive begins to breathe. It will take up space. It will have needs. It will at times be inconvenient, but it will be times here, asterisk. And after a lifetime of ghosting, that is the only thing that matters. You are not behind. You are not out of place. You are returning. To a self that was always there, waiting in the quiet, not to be easy but to be times real, asterisk. And a real thing, by its nature, cannot be erased. Here is the plot twist, the one you never see coming, asterisk, asterisk. The person you've been performing, for the one whose approval you've been chasing, isn't some external critic, it's a ghost. A composite sketch you assembled from old disappointments, past rejections, and every offhand comment that ever landed like a verdict. Asterisk, asterisk. You built a prison for your spirit, and appointed a phantom as the warden. The moment of truth isn't a standing ovation. It's the deafening silence when the performance ends and you're left alone on a stage, no one is watching. The exhaustion you feel isn't from the work, it's from the weight of the costume. The mask you've glued on so carefully has started to fuse, and the ache you feel isn't burnout, it's your own face, forgotten beneath it, trying to remember its shape. Healing begins in the archaeology of desire. It starts when you stop asking, "What do they want from me?" and dare to ask in a whisper so faint, it almost doesn't sound like your voice. What of times? I times wanted all this time. It's the terrifying, liberating work of dismantling the ghost. To examine each fragment, this fear of being too much, that memory of being not enough, and see it for what it is, not a law of nature, but a scar from an old wound. This is the pivot from curation to excavation. The perfect one dissolves, and in the rubble something raw and unedited begins to stir. It will be messy, it will be uncertain, it will not know the steps to the old dance, but it will be time's true asterisk. And after a lifetime of echoing the sound of your own voice, however unsteady, is the only compass you need. You are not lost. You are not a fraud. You are a restoration project of a self that was buried under a museum of acceptable versions, and a thing that is being unearthed by its nature cannot be contained.